So, John, let's start with you and some of this polling on how people are viewing the American dream and the government's role in the economy. Let's start, first of all, you asked the question, for you personally, is the American dream alive and well? 27% say that's the case. Alive but under threat, 37% say that. Under threat but there's hope, 28%. And I'm happy to say only 7% of Americans say the dream is dead.
Yes, and I think the headline, Willie, is the American dream is not dead yet. You know, so 27%, a quarter, believe it's alive and well. But I think the 2020 campaign is going to be a referendum the next year on the degree to which government will engage with the economy to restore the promise of the American dream for the current generation and generations to come.
So how does this break out? Because you spend a lot of your time in polling talking to younger voters and younger Americans. Do younger Americans see that dream as being more under threat than older Americans, or how does that shake out?
Actually, older Americans, baby boomers, surprisingly, are actually more concerned about the future of younger Americans than younger Americans in some way. But younger Americans are more concerned about the state of capitalism. Okay, so overall, there's more pessimism about the future than there is about the current moment today. But I think the big message of this is that they believe that capitalism, as we know it, is severely broken and needs to be reformed in some significant way.
Yeah, we've seen some polling, not from you, but from others, that have suggested that younger voters are giving sort of a look to socialism, and we've heard that from young congressmen and women. This freshman class, some of them have described themselves as democratic socialists. There's a Gallup poll: 51% of millennials and Generation Z have positive feelings toward socialism. Only 45% of them have positive feelings toward capitalism. What do you see in that kind of polling?
So we conducted similar polling over the last couple of years at Harvard, and what we showed in our last poll is the more people learned about socialism, those numbers went down. The more we shared with them information about capitalism, the numbers went up, which gets to, I think, the bigger point that we've been seeing is it's the way in which capitalism is being practiced today that's not being effective. Overall, when you look at the overall electorate, 18 plus, about 50% or so think the system's okay or needs to be further deregulated. So America is kind of split, but it's the younger people who overwhelmingly believe the system is broken and we need some more government control of things like healthcare, education, housing, and those sorts of things.
Funny how, Mike, when you read a history book, socialism becomes slightly less appealing.
I wonder why. Once you explain it to people, their view of socialism goes down. Yeah, Ron, you actually live in a real city. You stand in line for coffee. You pay for parking, all the things that normal Americans do. One of the things that John's polling has picked up is that the Democratic primary voters are not nearly as far left as maybe people in the party, some candidates running for president, might think. What's your assessment on the ground in Detroit, Michigan, about where we are as Democratic primary voters?
I think in Detroit and even outside of Detroit, in the great state of Michigan, most voters are closer to the center than professional Democrats and professional Republicans would like us to believe. I'd like to ask John if I could. You know, John, as you know, I've been studying your numbers and writing about them for 20 years. You guys do a remarkable job at understanding where the country is going by looking at the people who are going to inherit it. If young people generally don't believe in capitalism, what do they believe in, and how could the numbers you're talking about, how are they going to shape the Democratic primary?
I think that, well, first of all, I think that young people want to modernize the way in which they think about capitalism. It's not about socialism. There are elements of a democratic socialist agenda that clearly resonate with young people. For example, Medicare for all. For example, issues related to access to education and community college and those sorts of things. So those are clearly part of a democratic socialist agenda on one hand. On the other hand, they're also part of the mainstream Democratic Party now. So I think it's about modernizing capitalism and remembering an important part of the American dream is this pursuit of happiness. So the ability to work hard and have a happy, flexible life is something that I think young people are calling for. And when we look at the Democratic primary, don't forget that Joe Biden, who is much closer to the middle than everyone else, has a consistent lead in every state and every national poll that we've seen, which I think is further indication about people wanting to return to something more familiar, change, but also something that's more familiar as well at this important point of our history.
John, it's Katty Kay here in Washington. To what extent do you think that 2008 and the financial crash is playing out in the numbers that you're seeing, and the degree to which the people who are coming of age today have really only ever known a time of austerity and uncertainty and financial recession, to the extent that, we've talked a lot about globalization failing people, but I wonder whether 2008 isn't a bigger driver of these different trends than people have perhaps thought of.
I think it's an incredibly significant driver. We look at the millennial generation, the largest generation in the history of America, with actually two parts of it. The first part came of age before the recession, after the wars, and were part of the Obama movement. But the second part came of age during that recession, and they saw members of their own family and the community lose significant things, and therefore they have a different definition of the American dream, and the pursuit of happiness is a very, very important part of that. And that I think is why Bernie Sanders resonated so well in 2016, and elements of his message continue to resonate well. But not every voter in the Democratic primary is going to be a millennial. There's still a balance between both sides of that generation, both sides of the electorate.
All right. John Della Volpe, thank you very much. Ron, stay with us. Still ahead, Senate Democrat Chris Murphy and Senate Republican James Lankford join the conversation. And as we go to break, a story that caught our eye from the New Haven Register. A terminally ill Connecticut man who's in the end stages of cystic fibrosis received a call from the commander-in-chief yesterday. 44-year-old Jay Barrett, who's a big Trump supporter, said getting the chance to speak with the president was a big item to scratch off his bucket list. Morning Joe will be right back.
All right, Jay, you look handsome to me. I just saw a picture of you.
No, you're giving me kind honors. I look like
How are you doing? How's it going, Jay?
it's going, you know what I mean? I'm
You're a champ. You're gonna fight it, right? It's just fighting it?
it's what the Irish do, right?
Yeah, that's what the Irish do. You better believe it.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.